The woman lived where the mountain narrowed the sky. Her stone house clung to the slope like a stubborn thought, roof weighed down with slate, walls darkened by decades of wind and smoke. Each morning before the sun cleared the ridgeline, she rose, wrapped her shawl tight, and stepped outside to greet the cold as if it were an old acquaintance. The air up here was thin and sharp, but it kept her awake, kept her honest. Below her, the valley slept under layers of mist, while above, the mountain loomed, silent, immense, and never fully still. She was known among the scattered villagers as someone who endured. Not loud, not weak. She spoke little, worked much, and carried her grief the way the mountain carried snow, quietly, until the weight became part of its shape. Life had taken more from her than it had given, yet each dawn she rose anyway. Her days followed a rhythm carved by necessity. She tended a small patch of stubborn soil, hauled water from a spring hidden among boulders, and made her living carrying goods along old trade paths no one else dared use anymore. For that, she relied on her donkey, old, gray-muzzled, and slow, but sure-footed where younger animals stumbled. Together they walked trails cut into the mountainside generations before, paths so narrow that one misstep meant a long fall and a quiet end. As they moved, she spoke softly to the animal, not because it understood the words, but because silence felt heavier when carried alone. The donkey's hooves tapped stone worn smooth by forgotten feet. Above them, ravens circled, watching. The mountain always watched. The elders said the mountain remembered everything. Every footstep, every betrayal, every drop of blood spilled in its shadows. She did not know if that was true, but she felt it, an awareness in the rock, a patience that outlasted human lives. Some places along the trail made her chest tighten for no reason she could name. In those places, she hurried, eyes down, as if passing through a room where someone invisible stood too close. That evening, clouds gathered early. She had sent the donkey ahead with a light load while she lingered at the spring, mending a torn strap. It was a simple thing, something she had done countless times before. The path was familiar, safe, as far as the mountain ever allowed. The donkey did not return at first. She waited, watching the trail that wound between the pines. The light dimmed, turning the rocks blue and the trees black. When the animal finally emerged, it was moving oddly, head low, steps uneven. Relief rose in her, then froze. The donkey was alone. No rope hung from its harness. No familiar weight balanced at its sides. Instead, something scraped behind it, leaving a pale line across the dark stone. The sound was wrong, metal against rock, slow and dragging, like a blade being drawn from a wound. Her breath caught. She stepped forward, then stopped. The donkey's eyes were wide, whites showing, as if it had seen something it could not forget. It halted in the middle of the path, refusing to come closer, and the thing behind it slid forward with a final scrape. Other villagers had emerged by then, drawn by the noise. They stood at a distance, wrapped in cloaks, faces half hidden. No one asked where she was. No one asked what the donkey dragged. Their eyes flicked away when hers met theirs, as if looking too closely might invite the mountain's attention. An old man muttered a prayer under his breath. A woman pulled her child behind her skirts. The unspoken understanding settled between them like falling ash. This was not something meant to be found. She approached slowly, heart pounding, each step measured. The object lay half in shadow, half in fading light. It was a box, iron, heavy, its edges worn smooth as if it had been dragged across stone for centuries. Thick chains wrapped around it, locked tight, the metal dark but untouched by rust. No symbols marked it. No scratches named its maker. It was too clean, too whole, as though time had passed it by. She crouched, reaching out, then hesitated. The air felt different here, dense and waiting. The wind that had been hissing through the pines moments before fell abruptly silent. Not a leaf stirred. Even the ravens had vanished. When her fingers brushed the metal, a chill ran up her arm. The box was cold. Unnaturally so, but beneath the cold was something else, a faint vibration, like a held breath. She pulled her hand back, heart racing. This was no trader's chest. No lost cargo. Her gaze lifted toward the higher slopes, toward the jagged ridge that cut the sky in two. Beyond that ridge lay ground no one crossed anymore. Old tunnels, collapsed roads, stories that ended badly. As a child, She had been warned never to go there, never to ask what had been buried beyond it. The mountain, they said, had closed that path for a reason. The donkey snorted, stamping its hoof, trying to pull away. The villagers backed farther, already retreating toward their homes. And in that moment, standing between the silent mountain and the iron box at her feet, she understood with a certainty that made her knees weak. Whatever this was, it had come from beyond the forbidden ridge, and the mountain had decided to return it. The box did not stay outside. By the time night settled over the village, it rested inside her stone house, placed carefully near the hearth as though it were something fragile rather than iron-heavy and unyielding. No one had helped her bring it in. When she reached for assistance, the villagers stepped back, murmuring excuses, eyes sliding away from the chains as if they burned to look upon. In the end, she and the donkey alone had borne its weight, inch by inch, up the narrow path. Now darkness pressed against the small windows. Firelight licked the walls, casting long shadows that bent and twisted around the box. The mountain loomed just beyond the door, its presence felt even when unseen. Earlier, before the sun fully vanished, the elders had come. They stood in a loose circle outside her home, keeping distance, voices low. Their faces were etched with lines carved by weather and worry. One spoke first, his voice rough as gravel. He told of traders who once crossed the high routes with wagons full of silver and salt, men who believed themselves cleverer than stone and snow. They had vanished beyond the ridge, swallowed without a scream, leaving only rumors behind. Another elder spoke of betrayal, of partners who turned knives on one another in narrow passes, of wealth hidden in panic and greed, of blood soaking into cracks the mountain never forgot. There are things buried up there, she was told, that should not be uncovered. The mountain closed its mouth for a reason. When she asked what they meant, no one answered directly. One woman made the sign to ward off bad spirits. Another whispered that when the mountain goes quiet, it is listening. They urged her to take the box back. Or better yet, leave it where it was found and walk away. But none would cross the ridge with her. None would even touch the chains. When they left, fear went with them, but it did not go far. Alone now, she sat on a low stool and watched the iron box as though it might move. The donkey stood near the door, ears twitching, uneasy but unwilling to leave her side. She reached out to stroke its neck, finding comfort in the warmth of living flesh. The elder's words stirred memories she kept buried. The mountain had taken from her before. Years ago, when she was younger and hope still felt possible, her family had lived closer to the higher slopes. Her father had worked the old paths, guiding caravans where maps failed. One winter, he did not return. They searched when the snow melted, found only broken wood and a trail that ended abruptly at a cliff edge. No body, no answers, just absence. Later, sickness followed. Then hunger. One by one, the people she loved slipped away, some into shallow graves, others into the mountain's endless silence. When the valley emptied and neighbors fled to safer ground, she stayed. She stayed because there was nowhere else to go, and because the mountain, cruel as it was the only constant she had left. The donkey came to her during those years, a young animal then, stubborn but loyal. Together, they survived where others could not. It carried her burdens, and in its steady presence, she found something close to companionship. Losing it would mean losing the last witness to her life. She rose and fed the fire, listening as the wood cracked and settled. Outside, the wind had not returned. The silence felt deliberate. As the night deepened, sounds began. At first, she thought it was the fire, metal expanding, cooling, but the noise came from the box itself. A soft creak, like iron stretching after a long sleep. Then a faint echo, too distant to be within the room, as though the sound traveled through tunnels beneath the floor. She pressed her palms to her ears, but it made no difference. The noise was not meant to be shut out. Sleep came in fragments. She dreamed of darkness threaded with narrow passages, of walls damp with age. Hands reached upward from below, fingers grasping, nails broken and blackened. She smelled earth and old blood, felt the weight of stone pressing down. In the dream, she carried a light, but it revealed nothing, only more shadow. She woke gasping, the fire reduced to embers. The donkey stood alert, staring at the box. Moonlight fell across the chains, making them gleam. She wrapped her shawl tighter and approached, every instinct warning her away. She knelt, close enough now to see fine details. The way the metal bore marks of craftsmanship long forgotten, the lock shaped not for speed, but permanence. Her mind raced. If she opened it, she might find wealth enough to leave the mountain forever, to eat well, to sleep without fear of winter, to bury her dead properly. But if the elders were right, if the treasure was soaked in betrayal, then opening it might awaken something that had been sealed for good reason. She considered carrying it back to the ridge at dawn, leaving it where it belonged. Let the mountain reclaim what it had rejected. Yet the memory of the donkey dragging it home, of the mountain's unnatural silence, told her this choice had already been placed in her hands. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the lock. It was warm, not from the fire, not from her touch. Warm, as though something inside the box was alive and waiting. Dawn arrived without color. The sky lightened as if reluctantly, a thin gray spreading over the mountain rather than the soft gold she was used to. No birds called. No wind stirred the smoke from her chimney. The world felt paused, caught between breaths. She had not slept again. The warmth of the lock lingered in her mind, impossible to forget. When the first pale light touched the stone floor, she rose, wrapped her shawl tighter, and knelt before the iron chest. This was the moment beyond which there was no returning. Her hands shook as she fetched the old tools she kept for repairs, a hammer, a narrow iron wedge. She hesitated only once, glancing toward the door where the donkey stood, tense and watchful. Its ears were pinned back, tail twitching. It made a low sound deep in its throat, a warning she had learned to respect. "I know," she whispered, though she did not know to whom she spoke, the animal, the mountain, or herself. When the wedge struck the lock, the sound echoed too loudly, ringing through the house as if the walls themselves protested. She froze, waiting for the mountain's answer. None came. She struck again. The metal groaned, a sound like old pain being forced awake. With a final blow, the lock split, falling open with a dull clang that seemed to vanish into the silence rather than bounce back. At that exact moment, the mountain stopped breathing. The faint pressure of air against her skin disappeared. Smoke from the hearth froze in place, curling but unmoving. Outside, the pines stood rigid, needles unmurmuring. It was as if the world had been wrapped in cloth. She lifted the lid. The hinges screamed. Inside, there was gold, but it was not the first thing she saw. The chest was layered, its contents arranged with deliberate care. On top lay folded papers, thick and brittle, tied with faded cord. Beneath them rested objects wrapped in rotted cloth, tarnished chalices, broken rings, medallions stamped with symbols she did not recognize. Coins spilled from cracked leather pouches, dull with age yet unmistakably valuable. And beneath all of it, bones. Not a single skeleton, but many pieces, finger bones, fragments of skull, ribs darkened by time. They were stacked carefully, almost respectfully, as though someone had tried to keep them together when there was no longer room. Her breath left her in a rush. She recoiled, heart hammering, while rising in her throat. These were not offerings. This was not a simple hoard hidden for safekeeping. The papers trembled as she picked them up. Though the ink had faded, the writing was still legible. Names, dates, routes marked in careful script. Contracts between merchants. Agreements sealed with signatures and symbols. Then, abruptly, the tone changed. The neat hand grew jagged. Notes were scratched into margins. Words like ambush, shortfall, divide appeared again and again. She read until her vision blurred. A caravan. A large one. Traders from several regions, bound together by greed and necessity. Somewhere beyond the ridge, they had turned on one another. Or perhaps some had been betrayed by those they trusted. The final pages spoke of blood on stone, of cries swallowed by snow, of a decision to hide what could not be carried. And the bones. They were not strangers. She saw it then, the terrible shape of the truth. The mountain had not simply claimed those traitors. People had done this. Men had killed for this wealth, then buried both treasure and witnesses deep within the rock, sealing the passage behind them. Her hands trembled harder as another realization struck her, slow and crushing. The dates. They matched the years her father vanished. Her chest tightened painfully. She remembered his stories of guiding caravans, of uneasy partnerships, of rumors that some paths were no longer safe because too much had been lost there. She had been young, barely listening, unaware that warnings could be inherited. The wealth before her, every coin, every relic, had been bought with lives. Perhaps with his life. A sharp sound tore her from her thoughts. The donkey screamed. Not brayed, screamed, a raw, terrified sound she had never heard from it before. It reared back, hooves striking stone, eyes rolling white. The rope snapped as it tried to flee, but its legs locked, refusing to carry it even a step farther from the door. It planted itself as if rooted, shaking violently. She rushed to it, wrapping her arms around its neck, murmuring comfort. Its body was rigid, muscles quivering, breath coming in harsh bursts. Whatever it sensed, it was stronger than fear, it was recognition. You remember, she whispered, realization dawning. The donkey had been born here. Its mother had walked these paths. Animals remembered what people forgot. Behind her, the chest emitted a soft sound, metal settling, or perhaps something else entirely. She turned slowly. For a moment, she thought she saw movement within the box. A shifting of shadow, a depth that did not match its size. Her throat tightened. She understood now why the mountain had gone silent. This was not a discovery meant to be celebrated. It was a wound reopened. She closed the lid with shaking hands. The silence did not lift. Then, faintly, came a sound that did not belong to the house. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Stone against boot leather. They echoed from above, from the direction of the ridge. Her blood ran cold. Someone else knew, and they were coming. The footsteps grew louder. They did not hurry. Whoever climbed the ridge moved with the patience of someone who knew exactly where they were going. She stood frozen in the doorway, the iron chest sealed once more at her feet, the donkey pressed against her leg like a living shield. 3 figures emerged from the pale morning haze. They wore travel-worn coats and boots meant for long distances, not village paths. Their faces were sharp with hunger, not the hunger of the poor, but the sharper kind that comes from wanting more than one needs. One of them smiled when he saw the chest, as if greeting an old acquaintance. So, he said lightly, the mountain finally gave it back. Her pulse thundered in her ears. You should leave. Another laughed, low and humorless. We've been looking for that box a very long time. You don't find something like that by accident. They stepped closer, spreading out, not aggressively, but deliberately, blocking the path downhill. The third man spoke then, his voice smooth, practiced. He spoke of opportunity, of how much gold lay inside, of how someone like her could finally leave this unforgiving place behind. We're not thieves, he said. We're businessmen. We can make you comfortable for the rest of your life. She looked at their hands, too clean, too steady. Men used to taking what they wanted without dirtying themselves. And if I refuse? She asked. The smile thinned. Then the mountain will claim you like it claimed the others. And we'll take the box anyway. Greed, dressed as reason. Threat, wrapped in courtesy. Her mind raced. She imagined warm bread every day. A roof that did not leak. A future not measured by winter. All of it lay inches away, locked in iron. But then she remembered the bones. The contracts. The way the donkey had screamed. This wealth doesn't belong to you, she said quietly. It doesn't belong to anyone. The men exchanged glances. The first man shrugged. Everything belongs to whoever can carry it. The wind stirred then, faint at first, brushing her cheek like a warning. She felt the mountain shift beneath her feet, a deep, slow movement, as if something enormous had rolled over in its sleep. Her choice formed not in words, but in weight. If she kept the chest, she would survive, but at the cost of becoming what the mountain despised. Another link in a chain of betrayal stretching back generations. If she returned it, she might lose everything, including her life. She tightened her grip on the rope tied to the chest. I won't give it to you, she said, and I won't keep it. Confusion flickered across their faces, then anger. She moved before they could stop her, dragging the chest toward the upper path, toward the ridge no one crossed anymore. The donkey balked, braying in terror, but followed when she pulled, trusting her even as fear shook its frame. Behind her, voices rose, shouts now, curses stripped of politeness. Boots pounded stone. The mountain answered. A deep crack split the air. Stone groaned. Above them, loose rock broke free, tumbling down the slope in a roar of dust and debris. One of the men cried out as he stumbled, barely avoiding the slide. The ground shuddered, throwing them off balance. Wind surged suddenly, fierce and cold, howling through the pines like a voice long held back. The silence of the previous day shattered, replaced by sound. Too much sound, wild and unrestrained. She struggled upward, lungs burning, every step a battle against gravity and fear. The chest seemed heavier now, as though the mountain resisted its removal as much as it had once resisted its discovery. "Stop," someone yelled. "You'll kill us all." She did not stop. The ridge loomed closer, jagged and broken, hiding the old tunnel mouths behind curtains of stone and scrub. She remembered stories of those passages, how they twisted, collapsed, swallowed men whole, how the mountain had sealed them after the massacre, locking the past away. Another tremor shook the path. Cracks raced across the stone like lightning. One of the outsiders fell, sliding until he caught himself on a root. Terror etched across his face. She reached the tunnel entrance, half hidden by fallen rock. The air pouring from it was cold and damp, carrying the scent of old earth and something darker beneath. The donkey refused to go farther, planting its hooves and braying in panic. She pressed her forehead against its, whispering gratitude, apology, farewell. "I'll come back," she said, though she did not know if it was true. With one final effort, she dragged the chest inside. Darkness swallowed her almost immediately. The sounds of pursuit faded, replaced by the steady drip of water and the echo of her own breath. Behind her, the mountain roared, sealing the entrance with a thunderous crash. Dust filled the tunnel, and then nothing. Outside, the men shouted her name, then fell silent. She did not answer. Deep within the mountain's veins, carrying the weight of buried wealth and buried sins, she disappeared into the old tunnels. And the mountain closed its mouth once more. Darkness did not swallow her whole. Inside the tunnel, the air steadied after the collapse, thick with dust but breathable. She stood trembling, palms pressed to cold stone, listening. Slowly, the mountain's roar faded into a deep, patient silence. Not the threatening hush from before, but something closer to rest. She dragged the chest deeper, guided by instinct more than sight. The tunnel widened into a natural chamber, its walls marked with old tool scars and veins of mineral that caught faint light from cracks above. She recognized the place from her dreams. This was where it had begun, where fear and greed had turned men into ghosts. With aching arms, she positioned the chest against the far wall, where the stone curved inward like a closing hand. She took the broken lock and chains, refastening them as best she could, not to keep others out, but to signal an ending. This was not a prize waiting to be claimed. It was a wound being closed. "I'm sorry," she whispered, not to the gold, but to the bones beneath it, to the names written on paper, to her father and all the others who had never come home. She covered the chest with loose rock, one stone at a time. As the last piece settled into place, the mountain seemed to shift, not violently, but with relief. A long, low sound rolled through the chamber, like an exhale drawn from deep within the earth. Above ground, the world resumed. Wind returned, brushing through pine needles. Somewhere far away, a bird called. Sound flowed back into the valley, as if released from a held breath. When she emerged hours later through a lower exit known only to shepherds and animals, dusk was falling. Her legs shook, her hands bled, but she was alive. The donkey stood waiting. It lifted its head when it saw her, ears forward, and let out a soft, broken sound, half bray, half sigh. She sank to her knees beside it, burying her face in its rough neck, letting the tears come at last. The animal did not move, did not pull away. It had waited, as it always had. By morning, the outsiders were gone. They left no farewell, no threat, no promise of return. Only scuffed stone and the memory of fear remained. The ridge stood intact, scarred but sealed, its tunnels hidden once more. No one saw the men descend the mountain, but everyone felt their absence. In the weeks that followed, small changes took root in the village. A spring that had run thin for years began to flow more steadily. A late frost spared the crops. A rockslide that should have destroyed a home stopped short, as if guided aside. No one spoke of miracles. No one dared name cause or effect. They simply accepted the quiet improvement with bowed heads and careful gratitude. Trade returned, slowly. Travelers passed through without incident. The mountain watched, but it did not interfere. And the woman remained. She did not grow rich. Her roof still leaked when storms lingered. Winter still came hard and fast. Yet something within her had settled. The weight she had carried, of unanswered loss, of bitterness, eased. At night, the silence outside her home felt no longer like a threat, but like company. She sometimes walked near the ridge, never crossing it, never searching for signs. The mountain did not call her back. It had taken what it needed and returned what it could: breath, balance, a future measured not by gold, but by peace. The donkey aged further, stepped slower now, but still steady. Together, they walked the narrow paths, carrying modest loads, greeting the days as they came. She spoke to the mountain sometimes, not in prayer, but in acknowledgement. It listened, or perhaps it simply allowed her to speak. Some treasures, she understood now, were never meant to be unearthed. They were meant to be remembered and left alone. If this story made you reflect on greed, sacrifice, and the cost of hidden wealth, take a moment to like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have opened the box? And subscribe for more powerful mountain mysteries and hidden treasure stories that remind us not everything valuable is meant to be taken.